today's edition of the series, we are joined by Srikanth Vishwanathan, who is the Chief Executive Officer of Janagraha Center for Citizenship and Democracy. Janagraha is a Bengaluru-based non-profit working with the mission of transforming quality of life in India's cities and towns. Janagraha works with citizens to catalyze active citizenship in city neighborhoods and with governments to institute reforms to city governance. Srikanth's focus area in the urban sector has been city system reforms, spanning Janagraha's flagship report, the annual survey of India's city systems and municipal finance reforms. Srikanth has been an associate member of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India for 14 years, and prior to joining Janagraha, worked in the banking and audit. Welcome, Srikanth. Thank you so much for taking time out to join us. Really looking forward to this conversation. So Srikanth, I think just to maybe kick off, maybe if you could just, tell us a little bit about how you are seeing this rapid urbanization shift and what has happened in the last year with the pandemic. How do you see a change in, how things are progressing, and what is this change? And, just enlighten us a little bit about that.
It's a tough question, actually. It sounds like an obvious answer, but I think it's more complex than the obvious answer. Yeah. Because the obvious answer would be to say things have actually changed, and that our cities will never be like before. But from what we are seeing around us, both in Delhi, where you are, and in Bengaluru, where I am, it almost seems like we are getting back to the old normal, rather than to what we thought would be, or at least hoped for as a new normal. And therefore, I'd say it's a yes and a no. It's yes because hopefully some aspects of migrant welfare, of urban poor welfare, of health, etc., have actually now become center stage, and that's also reflected in allocations of the union budget, and I suspect even state budgets would follow suit. And therefore, there is something new that is happening in terms of health sector allocations for migrant welfare, urban poor, etc. But the reason, by and large, I would say, as far as cities are concerned, things haven't radically changed, is because there is no change in public discourse, and we don't see decentralized governance, people's participation, the need for systemic reforms in urban governance in India, etc., getting mainstreamed in public discourse. And therefore, if you look at the way people are commuting to work, if you look at the way our own municipal corporations are organized, etc., we don't see a fundamental change. We don't even see the beginnings of such a change. And therefore, by and large, I would say we are back to square one.
Yeah, no, I think I see the point you're making, because I think while at one level there's been such a recognition about the terrible kind of experiences that those who are at the bottom of the pyramid and a lot of the migrant workers faced, one would have hoped that there is going to be some kind of a radical shift. Also in things like when we see pollution levels that had completely dropped, the traffic had reduced so drastically, but now when we look around, it really seems like people have bounced back even in ways even probably more than before. So really, I think, like you're saying, it's a behavior shift, a mindset shift also, right? In terms of just us and you and I as citizens and everyone else in the city, there is one level, which is of course policy and reforms that the government can do. But until some of these are adopted as critical areas where people need to change their own behavior, I don't know if there is going to be that rapid a shift as one had hoped.
That's right.
So, yeah. So just from what you have seen happening, what kind of changes are you seeing in the way the municipalities or the governance is looking at some of these aspects now? Are you seeing policy decisions and changes that are going to be more effective?
The answer is no. There's nothing. There is, on the positive side, the union budget allocations for cities overall, and the 15th Finance Commission's allocations for cities are positive news. I would have expected a significant reduction in outlays for cities because of the fiscal stretch arising out of the pandemic and other priorities gaining greater attention. But contrary to that expectation, I've been surprised by fairly significant allocations in the union budget and 15th Finance Commission, aggregating to something like 7 lakh crores over the next 5 to 7 years, which is a significant amount of money coming into the sector for urban infrastructure development and for improved service delivery in our city. So that's on the positive side. However, I believe that the challenges of our cities, as they stand and as they will evolve over the next decade and more, cannot be fixed only by greater allocations of funds from the union level. The two ingredients for change, by and large, on the one hand, we need systemic reforms to city governance in India. That spans better planning of cities, better design standards for public utilities, better financial management, better levels of human resource skills and capabilities in running our cities, greater degrees of political empowerment of city councils, and devolution of powers and funds, and finally, transparency and citizen participation. So these are some of the systemic aspects that need to be fixed in the design of governance of India's cities. On the other hand, we also need far greater degrees of citizen participation through formal channels. Right? Some of it will depend on the systemic reforms, like if you need to create formal platforms of citizen participation, that can happen only through a systemic reform. But at the same time, we need far greater mobilization of citizens around public causes in cities. And I don't mean in terms of confrontation against governments, but what we call as constructive engagement. At Janagraha, we feel that the partnership between citizens and governments in neighborhoods has to be characterized by the middle path between aggressive confrontation on the one hand and toothless collaboration on the other. And that mid path is what we call constructive engagement.
Yeah, no, thanks for that. And you know, that's really interesting because I think sometimes we end up, like you said, confrontation sometimes can also lead to, you know, things actually not going anywhere, and collaboration with no structure or sense as to where that's going also falls flat. So if you could just maybe shed some light upon maybe some of the ways that you at Janagraha are trying to create and build this engagement between governments and its citizens. How does one, because it seems like a uphill battle. So what are some of the ways that, you know, you have been engaging and trying to make this happen?
So we function across the same two pathways. One pathway of systemic reforms, and in that pathway we work with the union government and state governments towards greater decentralization in favor of city councils, and particularly financial devolutions and platforms for citizen participation like ward committees and area sabhas. So that's one aspect of our work, which is how do you really strengthen our municipalities financially and otherwise. And the second aspect is we mobilize citizens in neighborhoods and get them to engage constructively with city councillors. So right now, we have a platform called City Politics, which is a national platform, currently virtual, where you know, we frequently get city council leaders to engage with civil society organizations. The idea is, how do you mainstream these conversations nationally and strengthen grassroots democracy? We also have a participatory budgeting campaign called My City, My Budget, which this year scaled up quite significantly in Bengaluru, but also moved to Mangaluru and Visakhapatnam. We are hoping to scale that to a greater number of cities in the coming financial year. And besides these, we have a very large engagement with the government of Odisha, where across the state we are working on strengthening slum communities in participatory governance, and even outside of slums, how do you create a fourth tier of governance that is closer to the people, where citizens have a greater say in civic governance.
Okay. So, I mean, so I think there are various tools and ways that you're working to engage civil society organizations as well as citizens by really trying to bring this conversation more and more into the mainstream and get people to kind of engage and interact with each other as much as possible. what are some of the challenges, in trying to make this happen, or what are your experiences of working with government? Because something like cities, you can't really change, while one end, like I mentioned before, is all about the people. But at the other end, without policies in place, like you also mentioned, nothing really can happen. So, and I know you've been doing this for many years now. What are the kind of areas which become challenging to navigate when you're trying to, create this kind of change?
Yeah, the principal issue is breaking the status quo, which is that governments are used to working in a certain way, citizens are used to leading their lives in a certain way. And, if you have to break the status quo at such scale, it's no mean task. So getting both governments and citizens to acknowledge that the current way in which we are governing our cities is the root cause of our problem is the biggest challenge. How do you get them to acknowledge that just by putting in more money and building more physical infrastructure like metro rail or more roads, etc., is not going to solve the problem? Those are important. Those are very important development aspects, but that's not sufficient for the scale of the challenge and the nature of the challenge that we're facing in our cities. So acknowledging the problem, the root cause of the problem is the principal challenge, both in governments and among citizens. The fundamental problem with respect to India is we are used to thinking of the country as a place which will be governed by a prime minister. We are used to thinking of the state as a place that will be governed by the chief minister, but we are not used to thinking about the city as a place that will be governed in a unified, integrated, coordinated manner by a mayor of the city. Right? We think of the city as an aggregation of different services that different agencies will provide to us, of which the municipality is one. And that is deeply problematic, because at the grassroots level, at a neighborhood level, the challenges and opportunities that our cities have are best addressed when governance is closest to the people, and when a range of civic services, civic infrastructure, and governance agencies report directly to the city council, which is elected by the people.
Yeah. Do you see a lot of shift in terms of the number of organizations or number of people getting involved in this space? Because I know that talking about city reforms and city governance and urban planning has, over the last couple of years, there has been a lot of conversation around it. Do you see a shift or a change in, just the number of people who are now getting engaged in it or trying to do it in a more organized manner? Is that something you've seen?
Again, yes and no. Yes, in absolute terms, there are more organizations that are being founded, that are taking an interest in the broad area of urban governance and citizen participation. However, is it commensurate with the pace at which the challenges are outpacing us? The answer is no. We need, and because the nature of the problem is local, you need thousands, if not tens of thousands of such organizations. And these organizations have to take root at the neighborhood level and city level. They can't just be a group of pan-India organizations.
Yeah, because I guess every area has its own unique set of issues and challenges. So if you really do need to kind of create change there, the organizations would need to be local at some
Absolutely,
level.
absolutely.
And just also something that we've, I think, been talking a lot over the last year, and I'd like to get your thoughts on it, is there might be many organizations, but what extent of collaboration do you see? Because some of these issues, again, are not in silos, right? It is all interconnected and interlinked. So are you seeing that as being a shift going forward as well? And as Janagraha, are you doing anything in terms of trying to make some of these collaborations happen?
So we are certainly seeing greater degrees of openness and an acknowledgement of the need for collaborations across the board. No denying that. And I've been noticing this maybe in the past 3 years or so, but increasingly in the last year or couple of years. Certainly there's a greater degree of openness for conversations, for exploring collaborations, and an acknowledgement that no single organization can address challenges of the scale. But are collaborations taking shape? The answer is hardly any. And they happen when there is significant investment of mind space and resources by donor organizations. One example that comes to mind is the National Fecal Sludge and Septage Management Alliance, put together by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And we had an opportunity to join the alliance very recently. And we attended the first alliance meeting just last week. And I was very impressed by the maturity of the partnership, of the depth of conversations that are happening at the alliance, and the openness and collaboration which is defining that alliance. But today, if I had to take an honest stock of what is the common thread that's binding the alliance, it is certainly the donor. And we will have to see how the same model can first be replicated in other domains, including in city governance and citizen participation, and then adapted or improved. But perhaps there are other such alliances that I'm not aware of. I do keep hearing, particularly on the philanthropic side, more such convenings, more alliances, more networks being formed. But I've not been part of any, and I don't know of anything that is substantive in the area that we work in.
Also, I think, like you said, that maybe on the philanthropic side, there might be alliances, but very often whether it translates into the implementation side and with people who are actually working on the ground, whether that shift happens is, I think, still to be seen across a lot of such initiatives going forward. I'll just, want to understand that in your experience, what are the, and you've talked about, systemic reform and systemic change across various levels, but what would be some of the, some bold ideas or some, initiatives that you really see, if adopted, would be path breaking, or will at least set the stage towards heading to a, into kind of making progress? Is there anything that you feel is very critical and is not being done, or that you see should be done?
I'd say I'd call out three ideas that come top of mind in response to your question. One is massively scaling women's leadership in India cities. And that includes women city councillors, who are probably close to 40,000 across 4,500 cities in India. Massively scaling representation of women in the police, in public administration, not just frontline field workers like Safai Karamcharis, but also decision makers, supervisors across levels. And lastly, replicating the self-help group model that has succeeded in cities in at least a couple of states, replicating that at scale to create voice and agency for women. So women's leadership in India's cities is something that I think we need to invest in as a catalytic intervention, which certainly is important from a gender equality lens, but I believe that could well be the status quo breaker for our cities as a whole. That's one. Second, I would say is, while it has a bit of an overlap, it actually has greater implications, is to invest in building the leadership capabilities of all our city councillors. There are probably close to 90,000 of them. And they are minions in the political party structures. They are not as respected as the MLAs or MPs in their own constituencies. And they are very often aspiring MLAs themselves. But that needs to change if we need greater degree of political empowerment of our cities. And one way to do that is for mobilized communities of citizens to start investing in their councillors' leadership. Yeah. This may seem counterintuitive because you expect the leader to show direction. But in this particular case, because of unique circumstances, our city councillors are disempowered, bordering on irrelevant in many places. And to correct that, it may be useful for us to strengthen their hands with resources, with training, with platforms and networks, etc. So they're able to collaborate with each other, inspire each other, and learn from each other across the country. So that would be the second idea, which is probably a pan-India network of mayors plus councillors who together can serve as the voice of India's cities. Right? That's the second idea. And the third idea, I would say, would be to follow the money in cities. Following the money is extremely important to drive catalytic change in governance, because money is a great unifier. Everybody understands the language of money, the grammar, the syntax, the vocabulary, everybody understands. It could be the poor, it could be the middle class, it could be any economic section of the society. It could be political leaders, elected or unelected. It could be bureaucrats. It could be civic officials at various levels of the hierarchy. Everybody understands the language of money. And what I mean by following the money is, one, push for radical transparency in where is money being spent in neighborhoods in India's cities. And second, gather the voice of citizens to drive that money where they want it to be spent. Because unlike the union and state budgets, every rupee of municipal budgets are spent to improve quality of life of citizens. And that spending happens outside your home and outside my home. They don't happen anywhere else. And this money in aggregate is quite large. Our own estimate of the aggregate size of municipal budgets in India is anywhere between 1,50,000 crores to 1,80,000 crores. And every rupee of these budgets are spent to improve the quality of life of ourselves and our families, children, the elderly, everyone. So I think this could be the third transformative idea, which is radical transparency in city budgets and civic works, accompanied by participatory budgeting.
Thanks, Shrikant. These great large topics, and I think all of them have their own levels of complication. But just to ask one question from the last point that you made. Currently, are there platforms and ways in which citizens can access some of this information, like you're saying, to increase transparency? Is that something that's already there? I think it's there to some extent, or is it really not?
It's there to a very, very minimal extent, which is not good enough to catalyze large-scale change at this point. So we need far greater investment in this area, philanthropic investment.
Okay. Thanks for that. I think moving from the fascinating conversation we've been having, and I think one can kind of talk a lot more on it, but would be really interesting to maybe understand a little bit about you and just as a leader now, shifting a little bit to the personal in terms of your leadership journey and, what inspired you to get into this space, and what are some of the challenges that you've gone through or turning points for you as someone who has been engaged in this area for so many years?
So my motivation to join Janagraha and this sector is cliche. I was an accountant in a bank and in a multinational bank in Bombay, and I wasn't sure that if I followed the career trajectory that one normally follows in the corporate world, that I would be fulfilled or that I won't have regrets much later in life. And I had the advantage of not having a child or not having taken a mortgage, and therefore I had greater flexibility in making what could have been a foolish decision, but I did take the decision therefore, and it proved to be a life-changing decision for me, because right now I'm trying to very, very deliberately blur the lines between work and life. I've been doing that for a few years now. I've had the benefit of being very closely and actively mentored by the co-founders of Janagraha and Janagroup, Smriti Ramanathan and Ramesh Ramanathan, and that was a huge dose of inspiration for me to continue on this path and do even better. So that's on my transition to the organization of the sector. But frankly, you spoke about leadership. I feel the distinction between the development sector and other sectors, corporate and government, is that the development sector doesn't have as much an emphasis on hierarchy, or should not have as much an emphasis on hierarchy. Because each one of us in this sector is a civic leader, simply because we've consciously chosen to devote ourselves every day to undertaking activities which are not just going to benefit ourselves and our families, but which have a wider sphere of influence. And therefore, the way I'm trying to practice leadership in Janagraha is where formal designations and my formal role as a chief executive officer is limited to covering operational risk for the legal entity, is limited to ensuring that we have adequate financial resources, that aspects like brand and communication are handled. But as far as our core substantive work is concerned, on catalyzing change in governance, on catalyzing change in citizenship, I believe every single individual in Janagraha is a civic leader. And I'd like to create an organizational culture of empowerment, of competency building, and of collaboration that makes each person believe that. And I believe this should hold true in my view for every development sector organization in India. And I'm afraid one of the challenges that the sector itself is facing is there is probably an overdose of talent moving in from the private sector, particularly at senior levels. And therefore, we are mindlessly copying methods from the private sector. I feel some methods like project management, like financial management, maybe evolving strategies, etc., are useful to borrow from the private sector. But what is happening is an overemphasis on the legal entity of the organization, believing that the legal entity is the one that is going to change the world, which is far from the truth. There is far more for the development sector to learn from the freedom movement, from the civil rights movement in the US, from the freedom movement of South Africa, from various other mobilizations that have happened in India for social change, or even from political or religious organizations, which have been able to capture the imagination of hundreds of millions of people. And I feel the new breed of social sector organizations and philanthropic organizations in India are evolving in some ways into clones of corporate entities rather than into large-scale movements. So the way I call it is probably development sector organizations should have bodies of corporates, but souls of movements.
Yeah. No, I think that's, really, not interesting, but such a valid observation that you're making. I think there has been so much emphasis of late on one particular style of running an organization that probably draws from the private sector, that we forget that there is a lot that is on offer from movements, and that the feeling of the passion and the feeling and commitment that has actually started the sector and brought people into it.
Yes, and I'm just reflecting, even as you were saying this, I was reflecting on the reason for this. It's like the old Akbar Birbal story, where a person looks for something that he has lost under the light. Yes. And when Birbal asked him, why are you looking for it here? He said, this is where I'm able to see, and this is where there is light.
Light, yes.
So simply because social movements, political movements have not been adequately studied and documented, and they are informal in nature, and therefore it's harder to codify them, it's harder to study them, it's harder to regulate them. You don't bother doing that. And just because the corporate form of organization is something that you're all used to, including I, because you worked in them, they are more structured, there is a method, they are more in the media and in the news. It's more fashionable to be associated with them, and therefore you borrow from them, right? So you're basically using whatever is available, whatever you know, rather than looking for what you need.
Yes, yes. No, very important points. And I think that's an important, topic almost for a separate conversation at some point. But any last, parting advice for young people looking to join the sector, or specifically the area or the domain that you're focused on, if there is anything that you'd like to share?
I personally have been inspired a lot by Swami Vivekananda, and I think the pithy way in which Swami Vivekananda would communicate big ideas in English are fascinating. So I would just say, pick an idea that animates you, that agitates you, that inspires you, and give yourself up to it.